Okay, we're about to get started, so if we can silence our cell phones. Director, just make sure your mic is on when you're ready to speak, because I think we had a little hiccup at the last budget hearing.
I think it's on.
Yes, very good. All right, good morning, everyone. We are on the record. Today is Tuesday, the 28th day of November. This is a budget hearing for the Department of Housing, Economic Development, and Commerce with the Jersey City Municipal Council. We had a scheduled 10 a.m. start. The clock on my cell phone is showing 10:23 a.m. May we have a roll call for the commencement of this budget hearing? Councilperson Prinzary?
Here.
Councilperson Baggiano? And I believe Councilperson Solomon is in the building. So we have right now 2 council members in attendance at 10:23 a.m. In addition, at its time of its preparation, the notice of this meeting was similarly disseminated on Thursday, November 16th, 2023 at 11:50 a.m. And a reminder was sent out on Wednesday, November 22nd, 2023 at 7:10 p.m. to the mayor, municipal council, business administrator, corporation council, and local newspapers, so I can certify as to our total compliance with the Sunshine Law. I'm going to turn it over to our chair, and that's Councilperson Prinzary.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Director, when you're ready to start. And what we'll do is until you get to the end of each division, we'll hold questions until that time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, council members, for having us here to discuss our budget today. I want to make one note at the beginning of the presentation. Well, in general, we're going to go through each division, so you get to hear from the directors. We're going to focus on some of the metrics, the numbers of what has been achieved over the past year, as well as looking at general accomplishments and then what our goals are for 2024. And of course, we'll go through budget numbers. The note that I want to make is that due to the hearings being now in November rather than in the following year in 2024, the numbers that we're showing you go through the end of October. So both that is the expended column in terms of any budget numbers as well as any metrics. So all the metrics are through the end of October. We can update this presentation in January, for example, and then give you full year numbers then. So just note when you're looking at stuff, if you're looking at it comparatively, that it's not an entire full year's data. We're missing the last 2 months. Okay, so we'll just move on to our org chart for our department. As you are aware, we have eight divisions in our department. This is the breakdown of how the staffing works between the director's office and the 8 divisions underneath it. What's shown there are when we say requested, that means what's in the budget. That's our fully staffed number. And then what's current is just what we have today. As we all know, things change all the time due to staff turnover and vacancies. So that's the difference in that number, but it gives you a snapshot of where we are this week. In general, although as we go through, you'll see we're not really asking for any additional staff other than in 2 instances, and we're going to go through that with those divisions, but those are the implementation of the new lead program. That's really the majority of it. And then one part-time person within the affordable housing division that we'll go through when we do affordable housing. And that's actually goes into the next slide. If we go to page 3, when you look at the numbers, that's really why there's a difference between 2023 and 2024. It's only that grouping of people. It's 11 total. It's 1 part-time and 10 full-time, and the 1 part-time affordable housing and the 10 full-time being the people to implement the lead program in housing preservation. Okay, our general budget overview. Shows each division and how the budget is broken down between them and what the change is. And there's some minor changes we'll go through with each division, but largely it is the implementation of that lead program. Okay, when we look at the director's office and what we were working on in 2023, the biggest accomplishment really was going live with our new online permitting and licensing software. It's provided by Tyler Technologies. That went live in June. We're about 5 months into that implementation. We're still working out kinks and making those adjustments, but it is a live system. It processes all of our approvals, permitting, and licensing in the divisions of city planning, including historic within that, zoning, construction code, commerce, and housing preservation. All of those pieces are fully up and running. We have seen, one of the observations that we have is that we've seen the number of permits after going live increase, and we believe that might be due to it's easier to come into compliance than it was before. It was easier to realize if you were missing a step than it was before. So we believe that that's the reason for that. And so we hope that that continues and that people do feel that it's easier to come into compliance. We are going to continue to train our existing and new HEDC staff on how to use the software. We have a full-time staff member that's what they work on, or making adjustments to the system and working with the different divisions, in terms of changes that they need, or, if there's issues with it or something's not working well, and that will continue. One of our goals for 2024 is to support code compliance, traffic engineering, and JCMUA in their go live. Those at least code compliance and MUA are going live, I believe, in January. And we'll continue to work with them to help that be as smooth as possible. But we do recommend always that every other group of people that are using it, have people that become experts themselves and really learn the software. But they can work with our staff member as well if they need tweaks. We hope to refine the software over time, and we want to use the software. I mean, really, this is where it all came from. It's not just an easier process and being more transparent to the public, which is very important, but also that we can provide better metrics. Really, when we started doing these presentations and looking at metrics, we found it's really difficult to provide metrics to you all. It's hard to count, exactly how many numbers of different things. Certainly, if we want to get more detailed, more granular, that's very difficult to do. We do hope after we have a full year's data in 2024 and 2025 that we can have even better and more robust data and stuff to measure against, because that can be hard to do. One of our general goals always is to increase staff professionalism and customer service. So we're going to continue to do all of that. That for us usually comes with being very cautious and careful about who we hire and who we bring in every time that there's a vacancy. We like to set clear expectations and encourage directors and supervisors to lead by example. One of our other goals is, as we've mentioned before, is to help train council staff to use the software. And that's something that we definitely will be doing. We continue to assist customers and constituents that want to use it. We do want the software to help make information about what's happening from a permitting, approvals, and licensing aspect more transparent to the public. That is one of the goals. So it's not just for use by people who actually are applying for something. It's also for use by people that just want more information and want to be able to see, that we think that eventually could cut down on Oprah or C-Click Fix or, things like that. So that is part of the goal. It's just to make as much information as possible transparent. And then in terms of capital project planning, we would like to, one of our goals is to work more closely with the mayor's office, the BA's office on capital planning, and see how that dovetails into whether it's funding that we have through community development or our master plan or any aspect where HEDC can be helpful. If we go to the next slide, in terms of budget changes, there really are not budget changes in the director's office for 2024. There's some slight, it winds up being 5% overall. Most of that were some salary changes, and there was a slight contract change for LexisNexis, but that's very minor. If you have any questions about the director's office, I'd be happy to answer. If not, I will turn it over to the Division of Affordable Housing. Yes, please, Councilman.
Time to bring this up, but I'm getting tired of calling up and nothing is done. All right. Journal Square, first of all, planning, zoning, they've completely destroyed a lot of our area. Nobody seems to give a damn. All right. I call up, I feel sorry for Ray Myers because he's shorthanded with people. Michael Young and I, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, asked for more people to be in there. We have no inspectors on the weekend. We have, you call, they say call the police. The police do absolutely nothing. I know there's a problem because a lot of these big developers make big contributions to certain individuals, but I'm tired of it. And something has to be done. If you can't, or your department can't do anything to solve these issues, then maybe your budget should be cut and we'll create another department. But people of Ward C are disgusted with what's going on. I mean, sidewalks closed. You can't get inspectors. You can't get anybody to do anything. Violations are a joke, because the big contractors, they don't give a damn. They'll pay a fine of $100, $1,000. They don't care. But something has to be done, and I'm tired of it. And I'm sick and tired of listening to the complaints from the people from Ward C and Ward D. And it's really nice to see that our council people are here to,
So Councilman, I'm going to ask you to sort of keep your questions in line specifically to the budget. I know
That's it.
some of these
If
do
you-
deal with that,
yeah.
but some of these I
Budget-
think should be addressed outside of this.
if you want an increase in budget, you want a budget, but your departments are not doing anything, and I don't blame them because you're shorthanded in staff, especially Ray Meyer's department.
Yeah, well, there's a decision made to not do enforcement nights and weekends using our staff. That's supposed to be done by the police department and code compliance that does have weekend, nights and weekend inspectors. We used to have some night inspectors in commerce. They were moved to the Division of Code Compliance. So that's a discussion that needs to be had with the BA's office and the mayor's office in terms of that decision. But our office staffs Monday through Friday during business hours, the code inspectors that Ray has, they make sure that they follow the building codes. If it's work off hours, if that's the kind of stuff you're talking about, that is supposed to be directed to code compliance and the police department. We can certainly work with them to find out how we can get better enforcement, but that's an enforcement issue. And the sidewalk closures, we don't issue sidewalk closure permits. Those are issued through the Department of Infrastructure. I don't know if you're saying that you're unhappy with the permits that are issued or if the developers are in violation of the permits that are issued.
Look, all I'm saying is something has to change. It's gotten out of hand.
To make change, we have to understand what is it we're trying to change.
You have to have inspectors out there. You have to close the jobs down. Sunday morning, the Greek church couldn't have mass practically because of the noise that was being made, the pounding and hammering. And I had to go up there on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. I called the police and, to close them down. And if I wasn't there to call the police, they probably never would have showed up. But it is out of hand, and we can't have them working on Saturdays and Sundays. The people in the area are tired of it. You got sidewalks closed. Nobody's enforcing it. Last week, you had both sides of Summit Avenue sidewalks closed. You had women and children and men walking in the street on Summit Avenue, which is dangerous. I'm surprised nobody's been killed. All I know is we need more inspectors. We need the rules to be enforced. I'm tired of hearing call the police because the police they're not properly taught.
Also, when we have the next budget hearings for code compliance, this is the right place to bring that up. I think it's helpful for the director to understand the universe of complaints, but let's.
I mean, I can certainly have a conversation with the BA and finance. If they would like that enforcement to be done within HEDC, then we can take that on. I mean, that's a decision that has to be made, not just by me, because it's not within my control to change, and add more staff and do weekend compliance, which we don't, and weekend enforcement that we don't do right now. I mean, I admit we are not doing it. I'm not saying that we're doing it. We're not doing it. We're not doing weekend enforcement. We also do not make the decisions on the sidewalk closures.
Why are we a major city then? Maybe we should just subdivide this city up. And like I proposed 10 years ago, Hudson City should separate from Jersey City because it's a joke. We're a major city and we have no inspectors out, no enforcement on weekends. People live here and are being driven crazy by these developers. And you know why they're getting away with this murder just as well as everybody else does.
And I think also too, we can schedule something separate to sort of really dig into and walk through these issues. Because I get similar complaints. This is not outside of this, but this is also supposed to be in the confines of the budget. So I want to make sure that we stay on track, but we can talk about.
It's the point is that, Anisi, I'm not picking on you. I'm just picking on this whole system and that has to be changed.
What I'm trying to do is recognize what the problem is and then figure out how we can solve the problem. So we do have to, do that because it's not going to be solved by us. If we're doing the same thing, all, if we're going to follow what we're budgeted to do and do the same thing, it won't fix your problem. So if we can really define what the problem is, and just to also say, our inspectors, when they are working, this is really a construction code conversation, but when they are working, they're out there, going on call, they're doing their scheduled route to inspect buildings based on scheduled inspections. What they're not doing is driving around looking for, where someone's not following the rules. So because that means there would be no way for them to get their work done. So if that is something we want to do, if we want proactive inspectors that are out there looking for violations, we would need to staff for that separately than what we're doing now. We're not doing that. That would be a change. So all I can do is bring that up and see if that's something that they want to do.
Denise, all I'm saying is the laws have to be enforced on the weekends. We need inspectors out there on the weekends. We're a major city now. We're not a little rinky-dink town anymore, and it has to change. All right? And it's horrible what's going on.
Okay, I will speak with the BA's office and find out if they would like us to hire additional inspectors to work on nights and weekends.
And just to echo what the director is saying, we are having our budget hearings now so that we can effectively plan and make priorities going forward. This is the first time in a long time that we've ever had our budget hearings in the same year for the following year. So right now, what's very untraditional is that oftentimes the council members are making decisions, financial decisions that affect operations. And so in order for us to do that, Councilman, I'm going to ask, as Mayor, the chair, that you put these requests in so that we can help figure out the priorities and where it's best fit for the city.
Yeah.
Just want to record Councilperson Solomon present at 10:38 a.m. So we now have 3 council members present.
So then we're going to turn it over to Director Gazan of the Division of Affordable Housing.
Hello, good morning, and thank you, council members, for having us here and to hear about our divisions. I just want to start with our milestones, the key milestones. We have successfully completed all of the testing on our affordable housing portal. So we are really sitting on it. It's ready to go, but the go live piece, there have been some technical issues having to do with server security, server infrastructure and setup, which is really extremely highly technical. And we've been partnering with IT and the law department to make sure that all of those things are in place. So I just wanted to sort of point that out. We have grown since February 2020 when we were just a staff of 2. We're now a staff of 8. And one of the budget things that, as Anicia mentioned, you'll see it changes. We are asking for an enforcement officer. We now have an increase in units, which I'll talk about, to the point that the violations are such that we do really need to use more of a stick than a carrot for people to comply with their obligations under Chapter 188 and under their affordable housing agreements. So we really need someone. I've proposed part-time. I know we're still in discussions as to what is really the best fit in terms of the budget and what the city can absorb for someone to come in and really just be dedicated to making sure that those violations that are issued are closed out. The law department has been incredibly supportive, but they are really overwhelmed. So it's a very, very slow moving train when we try to enforce the compliance. So which will lead me to that we have had, so as you may know, we are not just responsible for monitoring the units in our portfolio, we are also responsible for tracking units that don't belong to us. And what by that I mean Division of Community Development or Jersey City Housing Authority. We are trying to work with the state to have them give us a complete inventory. So that total number of inventory of projects, meaning buildings that we're tracking, is 129. Of those 129, 107 are being monitored by us in our portfolio, which means that the units that we track are 2,517. Of those 2,517, we monitor for compliance 1,509. The total number of monitored developments in operation that are actually leasing up or have, occupants, households already housed is now up to 27, and that's an increase of 23% from 2022. So in operation, what that breaks down to in terms of number of units is that we are tracking 818 units. 484 of those are monitored by us for compliance. Of those, 11 are low income units. 364 are moderate and 109 are workforce units. We've conducted a total of 9 lotteries since our inception for the units that we monitor, which is really wonderful. And then I think the other thing I wanted to point out is that there's an extra slide that I've added, so I'm just going to jump a little bit ahead. You'll see a slide that has graph on it, and that is since the amendment of Chapter 188, we are anticipating 359 total low-income units, which we had not had before. If you look at the graph in the prior years, all of our units were flat at moderate or they were workforce. So the amendment of Chapter 188 has really been a boon to the residents of Jersey City, and we're really very proud of that and how we are holding the developers compliant when they are referred to us from planning. There's been a lot of training. One of the other achievements, which I'll lead into, is the administrative agents in order to help train developers who are for-profit developers who don't really know how to do affordable units. You know, this is a real victory in terms of getting them to not. I don't get a lot of pushback on the low income units. I did at first, which was like, what, you know, below 50% and below AMI, I have to, you know, create units for that income bracket. And we're like, absolutely, yes, read Chapter 188. And now they know they have to do it. They fill out our checklist. And I consider that a really big accomplishment. And, you know, we've been in partnership with city planning. So I definitely thank city planning staff for helping us sort of really bring them to the table for what their obligations are. For 2024, we're going to continue creating that list of the master list of all the units in Jersey City. Our data analysts will work on that. We're creating a report which we'll publish in 2025 that will have all of that information and then also some recommendations for the administration based on what we're seeing on the ground live. We're going to continue with the portal when it rolls out. We're still going to have a couple of additional expenses, which is what you're going to see in the budget for security and encryption, which are very important. The manual was completed. We're going to be asking for an enforcement officer to really handle that. We're going to be amending Chapter 188 to reflect more of what we're seeing on the ground. Some of the language is a little vague and it needs to be tightened up so that we can enforce the compliance. We're working on the law department already for that, and we'd like to get on the council agenda at the early part of the year for that. And then we'll continue to cross-train with the divisions on the portal when it comes out. We intend to create more of a community presence, which we haven't had because we've been in the back really doing our setup. But now that we're out there, we want to do more work with the council people in their wards to get out there, let them know we exist. We have seen 900 residents since our inception that we've provided resources to, and we compile the list and continue to send them information as we update it. We want to train constituents, so we want to set up a training program for the constituents on the portal when it comes out. And then, of course, the very important 5-year housing action plan that we intend to draft. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll stop there. And if you have any questions, please ask me.
Any questions?
I'm sorry, Director. I think you said this, and can you just repeat it for me? When do we expect the portal to be online?
I'm really hoping February.
Okay.
But again, there are some issues beyond our control having to do with server security.
Okay.
And with IT, there was a recommendation that was, just to be transparent, there was a recommendation that was made that they not host the portal, even though it was the RFP. So we were going to make all these, you know, administrative moves to change the contract and take the hosting off their plate and put it on our plate.
Yeah.
Then it went back, you know, so this took like 3 or 4 months just to go back and forth on analyzing the infrastructure of a server, which is like really super technical.
Okay.
So I'm hoping February.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for me?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Director. Next, we have Tanya Marion, Director of City Planning, as well as she'll also go through the Division of Zoning as well.
Okay, can you hear me? So I think some of these accomplishments, I think you guys are pretty well aware of. Our phase 2 zoning was approved, I believe, last month. We did hold 3 citizen planner classes, which were just generalized information about planning to residents, and we've been consistently doing them on Zoom. Maybe next year is something we can move to do in person. It's been really successful. I love doing it, and I hope to do some more of it next year. We were able to bring on somebody this year who is a GIS specialist, so we're hoping to continue to build on our 3D mapping, our development maps, turning them more into 3D mapping. We've updated it so far, which is why it's a little bit of a mix of something we've done and something we want to continue doing. We really just want to continue building on our GIS platform. The historic master plan was done this year. We should be having a draft hopefully within the next 2 weeks. We just spoke with yesterday on that. Maggie and Sarah, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, were superstars when it came to get engagement and having meetings about this. We were able to put in 1 new redevelopment plan, 7 amendments. These are common numbers that you'll see. Those are not very drastically different. What I can say is that since Director Chileone has taken in, those numbers have gotten lower in the sense of amendments, and that's because we really are doing a much more holistic approach instead of these kind of one-off redevelopment plan amendments. And one of the things I'm most proud of this year is that we landmarked the home of Venus Extravaganza. And so to talk about zoning, I thought this, if it's okay to kind of mix both of these divisions. I think the zoning accomplishment that we really got this year was that we streamlined the process. When I took over, everything was still paper. And of course, Tyler incredibly helped us speed it up. But now we are fully digital, and I think it makes the application process for either the homeowner or the consultant, contractor, or the expediter, whoever it is, a lot more seamless. So here's a really good example of what it is. Because the process was kind of unwieldy, zoning gets a lot of applications. When you would be submitting something to be reviewed, it would either get denied or approved. And then that would go back to the person and they'd have to go through the process all over again. But because of the Tyler system, we save the constituents that step. So now it's just a revision, whereas before it was a brand new application. I don't know if that's a little bit of a fine difference, but it makes a huge difference for the person who's submitting something. We were also able to have one of our inspectors fully certified for zoning certificate. I didn't put it here, but I'm very incredibly proud of Clarissa. And I'll shout her out every time I get a chance. Once the historic master plan element is done, we are moving towards revising the H zone, which is the zoning for downtown. With this last amendment, we really did the RH1 and the RH2, which were the overlays for West Bergen and Sherman Place. I do not imagine that there will be much fine tuning done to those, but I know that there are some areas that will be picking up when the inventory is complete. Again, I want to finish the 3D model. I know that this isn't a part of our division budget and is something we're looking for capital funding. Is it okay if I bring it up? The surveys that we've been doing, the last time we did the surveys was 1980. We were able to update Ward D, but we do. So the historic surveys are more generalized inventories of all the buildings throughout the ward, and they highlight the buildings that have some historic significance. Now, this is a little bit different than being designated, but they certainly help in the review of demolitions. So Maggie, or in our case, the consultants, are able to look at these surveys and they can say, this building still maintains XYZ, and so therefore it still has some historic significance, and it also ties it back to a time or architectural style. And that allows, I think, the demolition process, at least the approval for the demolition process, to go a lot more seamlessly. We were able to update them because buildings change. Ward D, that was the first time. I am 40 years old, so 1980 was 40 years ago, not 20. So we were able to do it after 40 years of an update, which is significant, but we need to do the rest of the wards. And so instead of doing a piecemeal, we are asking for it to be in capital funding so we can put our RFP and do it holistic and get the rest of the wards done. Interestingly enough, I think the detailed level of surveys that have been done for for the other wards are not as detailed as they are for Ward E. So hoping to do with these surveys, we'll be able to get even better quality surveys for Ward F, for the rest of Ward B, for Ward C, for the wards that we're also experiencing the higher demolition numbers or the request numbers, which is C and F typically. One of the other things that I'd like to do moving forward is that now that we have the new zoning ordinance in place, was to really create more of a rehabilitation program for those third units. And we've been working with the director's office to reach out to the people who have violations issued for the third unit and work with them through actually going through making that unit legal, whether that be because the density changed, whether that be because they're going to use the affordable housing overlay, and bringing them through the permit process and bringing everything up to code. We are doing a cross training, which is that we lost a couple of seasoned planners this year, but we gained a couple of fresh new planners who are fantastic. And we've been doing cross training, which is bringing them in at the zoning level, so the very basic level, and then kind of building them up to be able to review much larger things like 72-story buildings instead of just bringing people in at 72-story buildings. And this is not anything anyone likes to talk about, but we really do need to create a better front yard policy, parking policy. I have my own opinions on how it should be, and I think in the next few years it's something that really we should be working together on to come up with, because as you know, it's one of our biggest issues, complaints, and things that we have to deal with. The metrics are not that different. They're pretty, I'd say, static. And of course, because we're not at a full year, they're not as complete as I'd like for them to be. The apps heard, you can see they're not really that much different. And it would actually be higher if we were looking at a December date. The dwelling units approved. So last year we did have a high number of dwelling units approved for planning board. And this year we have a significantly lower. I'd say if you're looking at it and there's a couple of things that are happening, some of those things have nothing to do with the Division of City Planning. It has to do more with the economy. And it also has to do with the fact that last year a code change was going into place. So I think that there were a lot of applicants who were pushing towards getting their applications approved so they could be under the prior code. And again, the zoning board, not that different, pretty static. Our number of applications heard, dwelling units, typically zoning boards are relatively low. We should be looking in the next 2 years to see these numbers go down because we have new zoning, which means that we should be seeing less zoning board applications. There's less of a justification for getting those zoning variances. And hopefully that means that we've done the right thing. And that's how you can always tell if the zoning is good and working. Correct. That is required by the MLUL, which is at the end of every year, we write a zoning report. Planning board is not required to do it, but every year the annual report for the zoning board gets approved and it tells you those things, which is that you need to change the zoning or you don't need to change the zoning and you need to stop granting these variances. And Historic Preservation Commission, again, these numbers I'd say are pretty much the same. One thing that's worth mentioning, and I don't know if I can mention it as deep as it needs to be mentioned here, and it will come before council, so we will be having these conversations a lot more in depth, is the determination of significance. We were sued and we lost in some regards, and the determination of significance were ruled to be not legal. We're still reviewing demolition permits, and so again, this is something that we can talk about more when it comes to council, but you will be seeing a number that's not the same. You won't be seeing it next year at all, and it won't be accounted for the revenue either. I think maybe these are budget numbers. I don't know if you want to.
We can talk about the budget numbers, but city planning in general is pretty flat. Increase was there's a little bit of, they asked for a little bit of increase in overtime and for the noticing for the printing and advertising, which has to do with noticing. The land use boards, which are on the next page, they're flat. And then I don't know if you want to go through the zoning metrics. You have zoning.
Yeah, and again, so I would say if you're looking at the zoning metric page and you're looking at the construction plan, part of the reason you're going to see 2022 1,900 applications for construction plans, and 2023, 1,439. It's not necessarily because we have less applications, but again, it's primarily because of how I explained it, which is that every time it could be the same application, but it could be counted 3 times because that's the amount of revisions that that person would have to have done. And that's 3 times they would have had to pay to go through the whole process. Now with Tyler, we don't have to do that any longer. So the number is lower, but it's actually more accurate.
Want to mention, we do recognize that that does mean a slightly lessened amount of revenue, but the reason for it is a good one, which means we're not asking a resident to pay 3 times to keep submitting the same document. What they're doing is getting it once, telling them what needs to change, and then we're allowing them to resubmit and not have to pay again. So it's a, there's not a huge amount of revenue loss, but we think for the reason is a good one, and we would like to lessen that burden on the public.
And I think the 2 things I think that kind of stand out in this is the driveway marking and the zoning code violations. So for the last few years, there has not been a fee for driveway markings or driveway approvals or curb cut approvals through zoning. We are still doing them. We do them in a different way than Nick Taylor did. And again, it is something I'd like to talk about and introduce a fee that goes along with it. And second is the violation. So we were told by the prosecutor's office, but the law department is looking into it, that we are not allowed to collect fines, that the fines have to be done at the court level. So again, it is something that we've been looking into, but until honestly we're told that we have the legal right to do so, we will not be collecting violations. It is something I believe we're saying that helps us with enforcement for sure.
Trying to work very closely with the prosecutor's office because, as the councilman mentioned, we do have issues with enforcement. It's very difficult. It's one of the more difficult aspects of the work that we do, is getting the follow through on enforcement. And we need a close relationship with them to be able to do that because the violations are written, but then the final outcome, it happens in a different venue, right? It's through the courts. Often it can't usually get resolved with just us. And so we try to have a close relationship with them to make sure that things are followed through and most importantly are abated, right? It's not so much about the violation and the payment or something like that. What we're trying to do is get whatever the issue was in the first place resolved and it not to continue, which is difficult. I mean, we have a lot of repeat offenders. We have people that we have issues with the 3rd unit, which I think really played into why the zoning changes were proposed because the 3rd units would get violations and they would just come back. So in the end of the day, it's better to have the 3rd unit, make it follow the code, be safe, right? Be safe for the people who live in it, make it legal because there are people in it and have them taxed for it, have the adjustment happen at the tax assessor side. And so that will help with the violations. A lot of time and effort was spent related to just 3rd units alone. And really, we were never able to solve it. It was something that Nick Taylor, when he was here, would talk to me about all the time, that it was an impossible thing to chase, that you would get rid of them and they would just put them right back because they were such money makers for people. So we were losing. We were always losing.
And the only thing I want to kind of jump back to and point out is that our number of affordable units approved this year went up. Last year was also high, but this year it's a reflection of the affordable housing overlay and some of it IZO. By the end of the year, we'll have those numbers and it'll be clear how many are from the HO, how many from the IZO, and how many from redevelopment plans. But I think even last year, you're seeing numbers that are much more because of older redevelopment plan amendments. And this year, you're definitely seeing people utilizing the affordable housing overlay. So we have over 200 that were approved this year, which is great.
Yeah, I ran Tanya's numbers actually when we were putting this together, and her planning board numbers show that in total of all units that they approved at the planning board, over 6% of them were affordable, which is pretty amazing citywide. The changes that happened because a lot of the zoning, it doesn't trigger it, right? It's existing zoning. It's been in place for a long time. So to have 6% across the entire city, that's a great number. And I think that we'll only see that increase over time because as we've been having opportunities to, right, we've been adding it in more places to the, as possible. So I think that 6% is really great number, and that's before the end of the year. So we'll see what it is when we get to the end of the year. In comparison to last year, which last year is a little bit of an anomaly, as Tanya said, because the construction code change was coming. There was so much done at the end of the year to try to get approvals, but there was a very, very high number, like 13,000 units approved, and it only wound up being like a little over 1%. But this year it's 6%. I think that was it. So questions, questions for, related to the division of city planning or zoning.
Yeah, what I was saying to you, Tanya, before, one of the biggest problems we're having is planning and zoning. Just look at Pavonia Avenue to Sip Avenue. You have all these major skyscrapers going up at once. I know they say as of right. That's BS. People are tired of it. You can't go down Summit Avenue. Summit Avenue is a horror show for the last year and a half. You have all these major developments and it cannot continue. You have to start spacing these developments out, Tanya. And it's gotten to be a joke up there, as I was saying before. And also, Tanya, your planning board meetings and zoning board meetings, they should be switched between the annex and City Hall. People from Ward C cannot go down there, especially elderly people. There's no transportation. They don't want to go down there. The meetings, anything that's involving our area, say Ward C and Ward D, should be held here at City Hall. And they should be hybrid meetings so people can get on and voice their opinions. And I'd like that to be worked on, but I really want the zoning board meetings and planning board meetings, anything affecting Ward C and Ward D, to be held here in City Hall.
So I actually have I'm sorry, go ahead if you want to respond, and then I have a question.
We are going back in person in January. That is,
I mean, we've been told that we're to hold them at the Holloway building. I am happy to bring this up. I will bring it up to the BA and mention that there's a request to have them held here in City Hall. I don't know if that's something that they want to do. We've been told we need to hold them at the Holloway building
And so one
person.
question specific to the budget about that. Is it more cost effective to do a hybrid or virtual meeting versus an all in-person meeting?
this is all what?
In person.
Is virtual less expensive than in person?
Correct.
Yes, virtual is less expensive than in person
Okay.
because of the, mostly due to security costs. We have to work with DPW and Jim Madden related to this, having the security staffed for the night meetings, and they're long, right? They're very long. So, and the overtime for the staff. So not that they're not paid overtime now, but they're able to jump on for, say, 1 hour and then, for, say, their own application, the planner that we're talking about, the planner, and then they can leave the meeting, right? And they just turn their computer off and go back home. Now we'd be having them stay at the office and they'd be being paid overtime for all those hours. So yes, it is cheaper to have them virtually, but we've been told that they needed to go back in person.
So I know that this is, again, the conversation to have with the administration, but as we're working our way through challenging budgeting times, this is something I think really probably should be considered, not only from an accessibility perspective for residents who want to participate, but also strictly from like a budgetary perspective. I've got my own feelings about the meetings, but that's really not.
We are open to virtual or in person. We don't have a preference one way or the other. Right now, I have a bunch of boards, most of the other boards outside of city planning are done in person.
Right.
And they're done at the Holloway building, rent leveling board, ABC, cannabis, things like that. But, right now the land use boards we've kept virtual, mostly due to the ease and the fact that when we get the feedback from the applicant, the professionals, the staff, and the public has been that they preferred them virtual. So, that's why we had done it so far.
And I would just request to have this conversation with the administration. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Now I'd ask Director Woodson to come up to talk about Division of Commerce.
Morning, council members. Just here to talk about the Division of Commerce. Most importantly, I usually start off just talking about the revenue. And year to date through October 31st, we're at $11,177,000, which is a 6% increase over last year. Last year, total fiscal year was $10,500,000. And I do expect for 2024 for that to even increase as we start to collect the cannabis taxes. Highlighting that revenue would be all the activity we had in the Cannabis Control Board this year. We received 34 applications in the year 2023, which means there's a total of 92 applications that have received over the 2-year period. The Cannabis Control Board this year approved 29 of those applications, bringing our total up to 53 in total of what's approved, and 22 of that total have been received full municipal approval, CCB, city planning, and the city council. The other highlight with our revenue would be the 15% parking lot tax revenue for 2023 through October. It's 8.1 million, where last year it was a total of 7.4 a year. So we're already up 8.7%. Additionally, with the parking tax, we have the mass transit tax that we've been collecting for 3 years. In 2021, we collected $900,000. In 2022, it was 1.5. And already for this year, we're at $1.8 million. The cannabis revenue itself and licensing fees and application fees, we've collected $78,000. I mean, some of our accomplishments for the year would be that we finally have some of these cannabis businesses open. It's 4 open to date, with there's another 28 pending, and most of them are pending approval from the state. We just started licensing the smoke shops, and although approximately 70 were identified, 10 to 12 actually have received their full license to date, and we've transferred about 40 liquor licenses throughout the city. I don't want to bore you with the number of applications that we processed throughout the year, but those numbers are there as well. And lastly, our goals for 2024 would be just maximizing the revenue from the cannabis license fees, as well as the 2% tax collection. And we're going to continue to work closely with the Quality of Life Division to identify any unlicensed businesses in the city and continue to cross-train our employees. Any questions?
We can take questions now. There are no budget requests specific to this office. The budget remains flat. It's a slight decrease. We're keeping the exact same amount of staff, and we don't need additional resources. But any commerce questions?
Excuse me, any questions? Okay. Oh, actually, no, I do have a question, not completely budget related, but so with the amendments that we've made to some of the ordinances, in particular with smoke shops, have they been helping you guys successfully shut them down and also collect any fines and fees that may go along with having a potentially illegal business?
I believe there have been summonses issued for those that didn't come into compliance by the deadline, which is the end of October.
Okay, great. I'll follow up separately then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So you note none of the enforcement's actually done in commerce because the inspectors were moved to code compliance, but they do have the license, so they have the renewal, so they have the ability to pull that if necessary.
Okay, great. So that's go both places for that information.
Again, a partnership. So we have to work closely with them, and they can go out in the field and do that side, and then they work closely with its office.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is going to be construction code. So I'll bring up Director Ray Meyer. And there is one sheet here related to community development. I did not have that director come today because community development gets such a small amount of money from the city. They're really completely self-funded. But what they have asked for is money for mileage and petty cash. And just to note, the reason that the petty cash has increased, the request is specifically because HUD money can't be used to purchase like food or water or anything like that at a public meeting. And they do a significant amount of public meetings. So she's asking for that money to be able to be used for those kind of public engagement events. And that seemed like a reasonable thing to do, that we'd like to be able to provide some basic, drinks and things like that, public events.
Any questions on that? That seems very straightforward. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll move to construction code. Thank you, Director.
I need an introduction. Good morning, everybody. One of the things that we'd like to talk about is the accomplishments of the office, and that was basically the adaptive implementation of the new Tyler system, responsive problem solving, tailored system to construction code office needs, report and workflow processes, ongoing system improvements, and a comprehensive training program. and applicant training, and significant reduction in paper usage, where basically we try to go as much electronic as we possibly can, and commitment to continuous learning. As you can see, that there's been a significant increase from the past 3 years, number of permits being issued in office. And that too was basically what Tyler had, what Anya had spoken about, was the rush to get applications in prior to the new code changes. And there's been a slowdown with the certificates, but that's based upon the fact, I think it's a 2 to 3 year cycle as the permits are being issued for them to get finalized and get on our records and stuff like that. The certificate, when a project is completed, we issue either a certificate of approval or a certificate of occupancy. So the certificate of occupancy basically says now we can start the whole process and put them into another aspect of government as far as taxes and follow-up inspections from different agencies. 24 goals and initiatives is basically enhance workflow and processes, optimize reports for decision-making, prioritize user friendliness, expand and refine training programs, enhance constituent training, continuous customer service improvement, improve efficiency in permit and certificate processes, and promote a culture of continuous improvement, and monitor key performance indicators. And what we're looking for, basically get done. And then we have some budget changes as far as basically some salary increases, replacement or additional staffing that would be needed to keep the office running, and overtime. So.
Questions for Director Meyer?
Yeah, Ray, as a person who drives you crazy on Saturday and Sundays, I'll go back 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Michael Young and I have asked constantly that your department be increased. And I think it has to be increased because you have to start enforcing the laws, especially on weekends. Now, I brought it up before with Tanya, brought it up with you. And, like, I feel sorry for you, Ray. You don't have the manpower. But over the last several years, we've been asking for your manpower to be increased. I know the city's in financial trouble, but I don't care because something has to be done to correct all these issues that are going on in Journal Square. Everybody's praising Journal Square, how great all this development is. Well, let me tell you something. Most of the people that have lived here for years and years and years feel that Journal Square has been destroyed. So Ray, let's get on it. Let's get you more people working for you. All right. Before you move to North Carolina and retire. All right. No, I'm serious, Ray.
It's an opportunity to talk to the director about it, but I think what the councilman is asking for is night and weekend enforcement for ongoing construction.
Yeah, he needs more
Not
people.
increasing, regular scheduled inspections, but enforcement. So what do you think?
I know from the phone calls, and then to handle the additional amount of work and basically try to keep it within a normal pay cycle as far as not giving overtime for holidays and stuff like that, where basically there is a problem, is that we probably need about 3 to 4 more inspectors to handle this.
Ray, like I said before, they want this to become a big city, a major city. You have to start enforcing the laws. I feel sorry calling you on Saturday and Sundays. You answer the phone. I got to give you credit for that. And you tell me call the police. Calling the police, nothing gets done.
But I don't understand that because there's an ordinance that has been prepared and been adopted by the council called the Construction Site Safety Ordinance. And it specifically lists the working hours that the construction sites are allowed to work. So whether it be our office or the police department, okay, going in there and saying, hey, shut it down, okay, or quality of life, basically code enforcement doing their job too. If they're here on weekends, I don't understand why a complaint cannot go into them and have the same effects on it to tell them to shut it down.
Because the cops are not taught here in Jersey City. They're taught by out-of-town people. They're not instructed by people that live here. Ray, as I said, I'm sorry for calling you on the weekends, but something has to be done.
So then this should maybe be a conversation we also have when we have code compliance come, and then we can maybe have another conversation at the beginning of the year about whether or not it makes sense to keep them in code compliance or consider shifting some of them back over. Because that's the only way we're gonna try and resolve this. 'Cause I do agree that we need better enforcement on evenings and
I mean,
code.
it sounds like you're saying you'd like at least one person on duty
Yeah,
at nights and weekends, right? At least one at any given time that could shut a job site down or go to it when there's a complaint or drive around town, right? To see if they hear noise early in the morning or, whatever. I mean, we're happy to do that if that's what the council decides. We will staff with whatever amount of staff it needs to make sure there's always a minimum of one person on staff. We also would like to encourage better, working relationship with public safety and code compliance to have them also be able to field those calls and those concerns, because really that's when things are working the best, when when you have multiple parties that can enforce the ordinance. Because it costs more money, right, to have one office that enforces the ordinance than spread it out,
Mhm.
between people that are already on duty.
agreed. Other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Now we'd like to talk about the Division of Economic Development, Director Arango.
While we're waiting for the director, I just wanted to mark Council President Waterman present at 11:13 a.m. So we now have 4 council members present at 11:13 a.m. Thank you.
Morning.
We're doing pretty good, even though everybody thinks the minority community, especially on the main streets. Can you hear me? Good morning again. We're doing extremely well, especially in the minority community. We have all kind of business coming into the main streets. We have great cooperation from the economic development in the UEC that is helping us immensely. We have a plan for January, I believe, to create a new Fiscal program, which will help not only the business community and the main streets, but it will help also the business owners and the property owner. We have a lot of things pending. Some people want to come here, and we have a couple locations that are pending because the rent went up or the lease is up. But thank God, I think we're gonna find a solution for those discrepancies and negotiations. Also, the Sister City program is coming up again. Today we got the mayor of Oviedo here, the Principality of Spain. He's looking to work with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey and the Principality Chamber of Commerce to see how we can approach more business. Next week, we have one of the senators visiting Jersey City. So Jersey City is doing pretty good when it comes, and the Sister City program is unbelievable. We're working now also with Newark to make sure that, because we see Jersey City not only as the economic development of Jersey City, is a region economic development, because of if we combine Newark with Jersey City and beyond, we can have a tremendous success here, So that's where we're working right now, and that's what we're doing. We just had 3 weeks ago a delegation from South Korea. They were very excited. I just want to thank Ray Myers, because he's always helping me early in the morning to guide, especially the businesses don't understand how we get the permits and how we get a license, etc. And also Cultural Affairs, the Department of Health. They have been extremely helpful.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just want to say, I see the Division of Economic Development says accomplishments for 2023. How about getting us some nice restaurants up in Journal Square? I mean, they've destroyed all the restaurants there. So,
Well, that's the most difficult part, and I'm finding that is I try to bring restaurants into the city, many good restaurants, but the lease is so high that sometimes they can't afford it even to open the.
Yeah, we're sick of the dollar stores and all
And
that.
a lot of the landlords, they prefer the chain stores, the chain restaurants, but we have
Right.
difficulty with that too.
You do.
But we keep working on, right now I'm working in Grove Street and one of the empty stores, supermarket closed down. I'm trying to bring a major Italian restaurant and bakery there. So we'll see, maybe we get lucky. But, in 2024, we go to General Square and we make sure that, Councilman, you're very happy.
Yeah, we're waiting, what, 3 years for the supermarket to open in Journal Square? And it still hasn't happened. We're promising.
Oh, but you're getting all those towers. You're getting very popular
Yeah,
there.
doing, okay, good.
And maybe something to consider with the UEZ funding and some of the funding going through the EDC, right? This year we have the facade program, which I think is great.
Yeah, that's
Maybe next
gonna
year
be fantastic.
Maybe next year we can consider like a venting program, because I know one of the biggest challenges
And also,
getting restaurants in is the venting that is not in some of these buildings. So maybe that's something to consider for next year.
and also a beautification program too is very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director, very much. Yeah, we should do a meeting with, you guys should meet with JCEDC as well to discuss those things, but we do coordinate with them.
Great.
I'd like to ask Director Richardson to come up and we'll do housing preservation. There is UEZ funding that has opportunities, and we've been talking about supporting small businesses, different programs to do
Yep.
that.
Right, good morning, Council. All right, if you look at the first page, we're going to talk a little bit about some stats and revenues. For the most part, our statistics have remained pretty much the same. The only things that we have seen a uptake in is the summons. We were able to issue summons this year. This was the first time since COVID we were able to issue summons for landlord registrations. And so out of those summons, we were able to receive at least 306 summons that were issued, which also increased the number of registrations that we received this year. As you look down, you can see pretty much the revenue has stayed the same. And so here we are up until the end of October, and we're looking at close to $800,000 that's been brought in thus far. Turn the page. This year we started, especially with some of the issues that we have with rent control. So we started an initiative on the C-Click Fix, where people can actually go to C-Click Fix now, and they can request to find out if their property is rent controlled or not. And so as you can see, just that alone, it increased the number of requests on C-Click Fix. Going back to 2021, we had 70 requests. This year alone, we've had 546 requests. 421 of those requests were specifically for property rent control status. So that's another way to help the constituents, because we found out that that was an issue that many people did not understand or did not know whether their property was rent controlled. Also, with the annual annual registration statements, you can see an uptick in that as well. Back to 2018, we received about approximately 900. As of thus far to this year, we have 1557. And again, the summons have helped those tremendously to bring people in compliance. So let's talk about a little about some goals and initiatives. Again, we're going to be some of the same goals. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And so we're going to be some of the same things. We're just going to continue to do better. And that is robust enforcement, which includes illegal short-term rental advertisement operations. We've issued, as I said again, 306 summons for failure to register properties. We're looking to streamline all registrations. We've been utilizing the Tyler system, which has been working very, very well. We're going to continue to work with the law department because, again, we've been talking with them, code compliance, some of the same issues when it comes to enforcement. We're trying to make sure that we're working hand in hand so that when we issue these summons, we're deterring people from doing the same thing because they're not seeing just the summons as something that's not really seen as taken seriously. When it comes to rent control, we're looking to create a database and a map so that people can actually go online to find out whether or not their property is rent controlled. Because of what goes into that, we're not going to rush through that because we don't want to have a situation where property is said to be rent controlled and it's absolutely not. So we're doing that slowly but surely, but that's going to be another feature that's going to help constituents as well as landlords because their property will be identified on the map. With short-term rentals, we actually are issuing an RFP to get a new company to help us with helping these short-term rentals be more compliant. We were here a couple weeks ago, and we told you about the company we were with, the vendor we were with. We were not really satisfied with their services, and so we want to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck. Vacant properties, we're continuing to work with the Fire Task Force, JCRA, to inspect and add abandoned properties to the public officers list. We're going to be doing a lot more community outreach and education, again, especially when it comes to tenant-landlord issues, because so many people just don't know their rights. And so we want to make sure that our constituents understand the rights that they have as tenants as well as the landlords. The biggest initiative is, of course, the lead paint initiative. We were with you earlier this year, and some of the conversation was whether or not we want to outsource this or do it ourselves. We found out that it would be much, much better, not just for the city, but for the constituents if we did it ourselves. It would be much, much cost effective, because doing it outsourced, constituents would be paying up to $500 per inspection. As you can see with the numbers down here, we're going to be doing $250 per inspection. With some ordinance revisions. And when we did the numbers, when you look, because this is based on the law that was passed that says all homes, single family, two family, multiple dwelling units that were built before 1978, we're checking them now to make sure that these properties are lead safe. When we did the numbers to find out how many properties would fall under this, so far we've approximately found 28,000 units that will meet the criteria that will require an inspection. The good thing about this is that on one hand, it creates another source of revenue for the city. And then on top of that, we've been approved for 2 grants to help with this initiative. One of the grants is the LGAP grant. This grant is a little bit above $340,000, which is solely going to be used for staffing. Because to get this done, this actually was supposed to be complete by the end of 2024, which was sort of a little bit behind the ball. But I believe that starting in January, we're going to do a serious push to get as many done as possible. I don't believe we're going to get the whole 28,000, but we should get enough done that shows the state that we're on top of it. So you have the first grant, which is strictly for staffing purposes, which is about, again, a little bit above 340,000. Just found out that we got approved for another grant. And this grant is more of a grant to help constituents, so that if they find that their house needs to be abated, they can get funds to help them with that process. With that grant, that's $1.6 million. We can use 10% of that grant also to go toward administration and staffing purposes. The last thing on this page I want to talk about a little bit is just the notifying property owners of the requirement. So again, in January, we're going to be working with the tax assessor's office on a mass mailing to send out property owners of all the required properties. We're also going to be working with the appropriate division to publicize requirements of all Jersey City on utilizing all of our social media platforms. And then finally, we're going to use contact information that we already have to provide an annual landlord registration statement. And at that time, they're also going to have to let us know whether or not they qualify for the inspection. All right. I'm going to move to this next page, talk a little bit about the budget changes. So on this page, you see that there is an increase in the budget. Well, this increase is specifically around the lead-based initiative. In order to get this done, we're going to be looking to hire at least 10 people, 6 inspectors, 4 clerks. The good thing about this is that the first grant that we received actually covers all staffing costs, and then that will be a renewable, at least 1-year renewable grant. We're also going to be using 10% of the other grant to help cover staffing costs. But then, as you can see with the initial revenue that we're going to be getting, when you do the math, 250 times 28,000, that creates even more revenue. So even though our revenue request has gone up, what I've shown you is that through the grants and through the fees, we should have more than adequate money to cover any of these new staff members. And I think that's it.
Chart in the handouts that you guys were given. So if you notice, this is really the only office where we're really asking for additional staff. There are 10 additional staff members being asked for to be able to carry out this program. But as the director mentioned, we're going to be able to offset those costs at minimum in the first year. And we do hope to go beyond the first year through grants. And then by that point, we believe we'd be bringing in enough revenue from those inspections that hopefully all those positions will be covered by the revenue that's brought in. We are trying to make it, zero additional expense for the city, and, not adding actually to, to our budget in terms of needs. In general, HEDC covers all of our costs, department wide, and we do always with any new program we have, we try to continue to do that and not to add to the, expenses on the taxpayer. And this one grant that the director was talking about of the 1.6 million is really exciting because that will help us, when they do find lead in properties, will help us to provide a program that helps offset costs to abate that lead. And we have to build that program and how we're going to implement it. But that's something that is really exciting, to be able to offer that. And then when we will, the director has been really great at looking for opportunities for grants, and we would continue to do that, of course, to try to make that available to our residents. Have any questions for the director?
Yeah,
Questions?
oh, I'm sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to know, do you handle the Airbnb complaints?
Yes, we do.
Well, evidently it's not being enforced because half of my neighborhood, I see them constantly and people complaining. I had an ordinance passed 3 years ago and it doesn't seem to be being enforced. All right, I'd like it to be enforced.
Well, again, I think that we're circling back to the same situation because even though we issue summons, a lot of this falls on code compliance. All we can do is issue a summons, but when they come before the court, that becomes out of a deterrent if they have to pay those fines, because some of these fines can be up to $1,000 a day. And so if you have somebody going in there and let's say they've been out of compliance for a month, that's $30,000. If the fine they have to pay is only, let's say, $1,500, well, then why would you stop doing it? Because it's basically the cost of living. So I agree too. I just think that this is a conversation. We have been working with the prosecutor's office to make sure we give them all that they need so that they can get the stiffest fines for repeat offenders.
Yeah, well, their houses should be closed down, especially during the summer. We've had situations up in the Hilltop area where they're having wild parties till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and people calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning. I have to call the police. These laws have to be enforced. Or another thing, I'm getting a lot of complaints from tenants, especially elderly tenants, saying the person has bought their house or something like that, and they have to move out immediately. This is getting to be ridiculous. I know where most of them are coming from New York City. They're buying houses here and kicking out people, and it's a shame. And the laws have to be toughened up, and we have to start enforcing all these laws. We have to stop harassing people. Citizens that have lived here for years and years were being crucified by these developers or people coming in from outside Jersey City and picking on them.
Recommend though, if that situation is happening, they should reach out to their office because their office can help them determine whether it's not being illegally evicted or not. There's only very specific circumstances where a new owner is allowed to evict a tenant. They're not just allowed to evict someone because they want to. There are specific laws around that, and their office will help with that. And if they can't, they can't give them legal advice, they will point them into. We do have, people that do provide legal advice that they work with.
I usually call the owners up, people who bought these houses, and tell them, go to hell. You're not kicking nobody out.
Well, I can't do that.
Any other questions? No, thank you.
Thank you.
That was our last division. But if there's anything additional you'd like to share or ask me, or happy to do so.
What's your greatest priority? What's your priority? Just for you being
there's so much stuff, but I would say one thing that covers every single office is, working with the staff for, good staff management, efficiency, building systems so that we can do the work in the best way possible. It doesn't mean anything if we don't carry out all the ordinances that you all pass. As the councilman is mentioning, that can often be a point of frustration. That's the enforcement side of it. But on a day-to-day basis, the 8 divisions are processing an enormous amount of applications, whatever type it is that their office does. And if we aren't doing that, right, the public gets frustrated. And really, in the end of the day, that's what we're here to do, is serve them. So we want to make sure that we're, as trained as possible, have most efficient systems as possible, possible, and that we can answer their questions and we can help them get through what sometimes is the only time that they might deal with the city, right? In a positive way. When someone has a negative experience with us, with the city, if that might be their only time dealing with the city, that's really a bad reflection on all of us. So that's one of the highest priorities that I speak to the division directors about all the time, is how can we make sure that we have the public has a good experience with us, because we don't want it to be frustrating, whatever it is that they're trying to do, whether it's, pull a permit or file a, landlord registration, or, whatever it is. So really, to me, it's all about staff management and efficiency. Obviously, it goes broader than that, right? And I work on all kinds of things, but the thing that's most common across all divisions is that.
That-
All right, Denise, just do me a favor.
Council.
When we started this meeting, I brought up a bunch of issues.
Noted.
Let's start solving some of the issues, okay? Let's get Ray some help, more inspectors, okay?
I'm happy to implement a program on nights and weekends that we don't have now. I will, work with the finance team and the BA's office and see if there's a way to do that. I don't know the best way to do it, but we try to not add to our staffing if possible, to not create a tax burden. But I hear what you're saying. If it's not working on nights and weekends, then we need to find a better solution.
But let me ask the finance department something, because, based on what I'm hearing when I'm doing the budget hearing, there's always like a staff shortage. I mean, every year it's a
This
staff
isn't about
shortage.
staff shortage, though. We literally do not staff nights and weekends. Like we
Right,
don't
no,
have-
yeah,
don't do that.
you don't do that,
No.
but,
We used to have in commerce, just to be clear, we did have a night inspector in commerce, but when the quality of life division was created and those went to code compliance, we
Gotcha.
don't have that. But I will say, even then, they were dealing with commerce's issues, mostly noise. Noise complaints are a serious one, and the commerce inspectors did deal with that previously. And they also dealt with other stuff off hours like taxis, et cetera. But that and then moved to code compliance. We never, our department specifically, you did not deal with like construction on weekends internally to our department.
right, because it seemed like every year when I come with this division, Ray is still understaffed.
I mean,
And I'm just
can
trying to
ask
figure
him
out.
now. I
No,
don't
I
believe he
mean,
feels he's understaffed for like, the normal business hours. Hey, you're welcome to weigh in if you want to, but we do talk about it all the time.
right.
He's not asking for additional staff right now. I mean, we do have a few positions that are open.
Right,
We're not, there's nothing that he,
I mean, there's some numbers where we have to do some replacements because there was some guys that we lost
right,
here and stuff like that. Working with those people there, we can turn around and move things around to get things done. But also take into consideration too, all the buildings that are going up where inspectors have to be there two
Right.
times a week at the same time to do it, and then come in on a Saturday, okay? Which at times I do have somebody come in just to shake things up, to see if they are working, say, give them tickets for what they're doing. But a Sunday job, it should be an order.
right.
The one area that Ray and I have talked about that there has been a shortage actually was in fire inspectors. We were behind in
Okay.
fire. One of the changes in both the org chart and your budget, you'll see, we took one of the fire inspectors that was part-time, Frank Prezioso. He worked part-time for us, actually not very much, like very low hours. And our plan is in the next year is to have him work full-time for us. So that is one way that we did see a need in one area. And it wasn't that, I mean, he wasn't available to work more hours,
Okay.
but that was one area where we made a change specifically because we saw we were behind. In general, when we're fully staffed, we're fine. It's usually right when someone is out on a medical leave or something.
Right.
Extensive. I'm not talking about vacation, but something that might draw someone away from us for a long period of time, that we have shortages. There are some new laws that have been changing at the state level that would allow us to have, and this is something we've been talking about with finance and the BA. There's a law that was passed. There was legislation proposed, but yeah, you can explain it. But I think they're still working out the details.
What they did was the governor passed a legislation that said that we had to respond to a request for an inspection within 3 business days. And if we couldn't do that, then we have to turn around and provide that the owners can basically hire a third-party inspection
Right.
agency to do the inspections, or the city can basically hire a third-party inspection agency to conduct those inspections. But it's not for people that are on vacation. It's just if you just can't do it. So we've looked into different possibilities of basically going into contracts with third-party agency to supply us with the needed inspectors that would be required if we have to do it and cover those inspections. Down to now. As far as the staffing levels though, I have to give my team a lot of credit because, and you can see it going around even up in Journal Square and everything else like that, the amount of work that is being done in this town and the results that are coming through as far as getting certificates issued so that they can get on the tax rolls. And I think that's one of the key things that is being done. And it's being done kind of safely because I think we've reduced a lot of issues on sites and stuff like that by working with fire department conducting weekly inspections, and the ordinance itself that keeps things on track too. So.
That we did have a budget, even a budgetary solution to the, like this, we would go out for an on-call contract, for example, that would allow a company to respond, that we would then put on call that could provide any of the inspections across any of the trades, right? So it's not like hiring more inspectors, it's just providing on-call contract. And as you all know, we've had these conversations every single year. It's very difficult to get elevator inspectors. We still have one opening right now. And one thought that we had is that if we do, when it's the legislation is in a place that, you know, we can actually implement this, we could take that one position that we're holding that money for, do an on-call contract and use that money to fund it for the year, for say 2024, and see what the needs are in that year. Did we need to use it? You know, do we need to, pull someone in when we have, someone out extensively or we're unable to meet the timelines required by the state, but we would have no budget impact during that year. And then if it was like, if it was like gangbusters and we really used it a lot, then we would come back to you next year and maybe talk about that. But that is one thing that the state just recently allowed that might help with if there is ever any backlog in one specific trade. Usually this, like he's saying, the staff does such a great job. They can usually turn inspections around quite quickly. We do sometimes get an email or a phone call when someone needs to schedule an inspection and it's further out than they had wanted. Maybe they wanted it within 2 days and we were able to give it to them in a week. Usually Ray's really great about being able to accommodate them. We can usually move some stuff around to do that if it's really going to impact their schedule. But they do, for the size of our city and how much construction, they are out there. The turnaround is quite quick. Any additional questions?
I changed.
Yep.
All right, council members, may I have a motion to adjourn at 11:44 a.m.? Motion made by Council President Waterman. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilperson Prinzary. All in favor of the motion to adjourn at 11:44 a.m. by acclamation, please say aye. We are out of here at 11:44 a.m. Thank you so much, everyone present here in the chambers and everyone watching at home. And remember, teamwork makes the dream work. Have a great rest of the day.